Welcome into a brand new edition of the Bleav in Heels Hoops podcast presented by Bleav Podcast Networks. I'm your host, Desmond Johnson, joined by the Tar Heel Tribune's R.L. Bynum, giving you a fresh episode every single week during the Tar Heels basketball season. Tough loss for the Heels last night on the road versus Georgia Tech, 74-73. Pretty thrilling game, especially if you're a Yellow Jacket fan. But we'll get into that. Of course, it's rivalry week now, officially. Now that game is over. If you are a true part of this UNC Duke rivalry, you know that rivalry week does not officially begin until either UNC or Duke plays their final game before the Carolina Duke game, and that was us last night in Georgia Tech. So we are officially in rivalry week now. So everybody pull out your memes and jokes and everything else, and we'll bring the boys down from Durham over to the Dean Dome. Joining us tonight, we're very happy to have Pete Chilcutt with us. He was on the Tar Heels from 1987 to 91. Did I get that right, Pete?
Yeah, I arrived in 86, but I redshirted that first year, so 87, 91.
87 91. So playing under Dean Smith, actually played with current head coach Hubert Davis. So we'll talk to him a little bit about Hubert, what he knows from their college careers, anything that he can actually reveal on the air. We'll get into some of that too. And then just some of our thoughts of the upcoming UNC Duke game. But guys, let's just get into what happened last night. Initial thoughts. Let's start off with you, Pete, because you were actually calling this game for the Tar Heels Radio Network with Jones Angel. And what did you think watching it from courtside? Did you feel like it was so much Georgia Tech won that game or Carolina lost it?
First of all, there was a lot of talk before the game about that being a trap game. I was out there kind of talking about how with this veteran team that wouldn't happen and we would be ready to play. And it didn't feel like we weren't ready. It just felt like we had the first time this year, multiple players play pretty poorly, shoot poorly, defend poorly. We didn't have any really consistent outside shooting. Even RJ, who did his normal damage, was a little bit below his shooting percentage. I just didn't think we brought enough what we needed last night on an away court. We gave them life in that first half. Once we gave them that life, they started playing really well. And we just I wouldn't say we gave it away, but we didn't really deserve that victory with the way we played last night. That's
kind of what I left the game with too. Like even if RJ's layup had gone in and they didn't score going back the other way, I kind of would have. Of course, I would have been like, "Oh, yay, we won!" But deep down, I'm like, I don't know if we were supposed to win that one. I think we stole that one. R.L., your thoughts on what you witnessed last night down in Atlanta? And I got it before you even begin. I got to mention, if you're just now joining us on Bleav in Heels Hoops, R.L. has been on point for about 3 or 4 weeks, pinpointing this very game as the game that could be trouble because of the Tar Heels' troubles in Atlanta that stretch back 40 years. So you were right, sir. You were
right, but the Tar Heels had a chance to really build a big margin in the first half and just put them away, and they couldn't do it. But they've had recent games where at halftime it's close or they're trailing. They've always been able to surge in the second half, but they just couldn't do it yesterday. And, the worst shooting from the line and the field all season. And they still only lost by a point. And frankly, RJ Davis was fouled on that last play. And that would have put the best free throw shooter in program history at the line and probably be able to win. But the point is they shouldn't have been there.
Right. And that's where I kind of come back to, because on one hand, I'm like, yeah, that was a foul. And I've seen people go, well, they were at Georgia Tech. The home team's going to get that call, yada, 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 and that part of the game. I'm like, yeah, they get that call when they're not calling it throughout the game. Like they were calling that foul throughout the game. And then for whatever reason, they didn't call it that point right there. But to RL's point, it shouldn't even been decided on that play. Like, so I can't even use that as the reason why Carolina lost. They lost because they couldn't hit free throws. And they lost because they shot 26% from three. That's pretty much the gist of the game, especially the free throws. If they just hit 60% on their free throws, they win by 5. I mean, it's so crazy, the margins of victory for some of these teams, where I've actually left the game feeling good. It's weird because like the past couple of years when Carolina would lose, it was almost like despondent, like, what are we going to do to fix this? This was more like, we played like probably our worst we've played all year, and we lost by a point on a last-second wild left-handed layup, and then a missed foul call at the end. And to be honest, the dude traveled. The dude traveled on the layup on top of it. He took 3 steps. So all that had to happen, plus us shooting just horrifically from the free throw line, which we rarely do, Plus, we shot horribly from 3-point line, which we rarely do this year. All that had to happen for us to lose by 1 to a team that's beaten Duke, to a team that's beaten Mississippi State. I think they've beaten Clemson, if I'm not mistaken. They've got some wins. Georgia Tech is a weird team. They're a very weird team. They play up to their competition. And I thought we were going to be in trouble when we came out of halftime. And we talked about this before, R.L., where this year's team feels different, where when they come out of the half, they kind of punch the gas and go. They'll hit like with an 8-0 run, 12-0 run right out the gate, and the other team's kind of punch drunk. They couldn't do that this time because Georgia Tech came out and actually started throwing some haymakers at the very beginning. And it was almost like right then North Carolina, oh, we're in a fight. And like the rest of the second half was just them kind of clawing to get ahead. And they used all their energy to try to get ahead. And dude just hit a shot. Like, I can't be mad at Georgia Tech for that. I mean, they played very, very well and got a win. I don't know if they'd have to win out to get to the NCAA tournament at this point because they lost so many before. But I don't know. It was one of those games. I had R.L.'s voice in my head while I was watching the second half. It's like, they're in Atlanta. They're in Atlanta. Talk to me a little bit, guys, about anything that you saw in the game Tuesday night that makes you worried going forward into Saturday night that might carry over, or do you think that's a one-off type of thing that you saw that bothered you on Tuesday? Pete?
I'd like to touch on, I'm not concerned. I believe we have an extremely talented team and we have so many different options. But I would like to see a little bit more consistency. And I've been one of his biggest defenders in Armando Bacot. But last night was the first time I noticed. Now, I don't usually watch interactions on the sideline, but I noticed Coach Davis was a little upset with him when he took him out there in the game. I think that was in the first half. And I don't know what it was really about, other than maybe some effort on some of those rebounds. I'm his biggest defender in the sense that I don't believe he has to score 20 and 10 for us this year. I think he can be pretty much a little bit below those numbers with what we have around him now. But I think there may be something going on that I'm not privy to as far as of that dynamic that I saw last night. Coach Davis was mad at him. And it may have been just a moment thing where he didn't go hard on one or two plays and coach took him out. But that would be a little concerning because I really think he needs to be on the court. I think he provides a presence. As you notice, even when he's not scoring, they double him a lot, which is good for us. And beyond that, like, I would like to see just a little bit more consistency on guys that can shoot, knocking down some of those open shots. Because I'm a big believer this year that we're not forcing a lot of shots. I think we're getting a lot of good open shots. And I think early on, Harrison was knocking a bunch of those down, and he's still shooting above 40%. By no means is he doing poorly, but we're getting a lot of open shots. Guys like him and Cormac Ryan got to take advantage of those situations because we haven't had a history of shooters like that can knock them down to about a 40% clip or a little below. And I know they can do it. So I'm not concerned, but that's going to be a big part of our success, determining how far we can go this year.
Yeah, I'd like to see more consistent shooting from Cormac. He's been a streaky shooter throughout his career, but if he can be consistent, that'll be huge for Carolina. And to Pete's point, you notice in the second half, Jalen Washington was in there for about 5 minutes, and Armando was sitting on the bench. Mm-hmm. And that was an extended period. And Hubert was asked about it after the game. He just said he thought Jalen deserved the minutes, and that may speak to what you were talking about there. His offense, and he had 5 points in 2 consecutive games before last night. But, his defense has been solid the last 3 games, though. That's been fairly consistent.
And I'm starting to see this narrative with some Carolina fans online. First of all, social media is the devil, so you can really take it with a grain of salt. But I'm seeing a lot of folks basically saying that Armando's playing soft this year and that he's not doing as much or whatnot. And whenever I see it, I'm like, he doesn't have to. Like, I'd much rather Armando be this version of Armando, and we're on top of the ACC and, having 10-game win streaks and all that, instead of him having to score, 25 points a game and 12 rebounds and can't get hurt and can't come out. and then we might win. Like, that's what we just went through the past 2 years. So part of it's the growth of Jalen Washington, who truly is, in my opinion, more of a Hubert guy. Like, he's one of the first recruits that Hubert brought in, like, underneath Hubert. So, like, and he believes in Jalen. Like, he was hurt in high school. He still took a chance on him. So, like, they've waited it out. And I think, to be honest, Jalen's going to be a problem by next year or so when Armando's not here. I think his eligibility's out after this year. So when when he does go and Jalen's here next year, I think he'll be the starting center. Of course, you've got Drake Powell coming in that incredible freshman class he's got coming too. But I just see that narrative and I just kind of shake my head. Like, there's certain things Armando's doing that's not on the stats sheet. Like that will never be on the stats sheet in terms of defensively and setting picks for RJ. That last play that they had last night, I thought was brilliant. I thought it was perfect. It was the perfect play to run. You got it into your two leaders' hands, Armando to RJ, and he just missed the floater. I mean, it happens, so I can't really be mad at what happened last night. If anything, I noticed my Duke friends, they chirped a little bit online right after the game was over because they know we chirped after they lost to Georgia Tech too. But it's been kind of crickets today, and I kind of expected it a little bit more. And then I realized they're like, oh, they realized we just lost going into the Duke game. And when you lose going into that game, it feels like that team has an edge to them. Pete, can you talk to that? Because you've been in these games before, and I want to bring up to me, the 1989 ACC Conference Championship is the beginning of what we know of UNC Duke today. Like, it's always been Carolina versus somebody for as long as the ACC has existed. Carolina State, Carolina Maryland, Carolina Virginia. Like, it's always been somebody. But I think the perception that it's always been Carolina Duke, that didn't really, the way we know it today, that didn't really start until like the late 80s when Coach K kind of got it rolling over there. And then the 89 championship game that you played in really kind of set it off. Carolina won that game. There was a lot of blood spilled in that in that game. What's it like? What's it like going into a Duke Carolina game? And what's it like going into one where there's like something on the line, like an ACC title, a Final Four, seeding? Like it just adds another layer to it. What are you as a player like doing like over the course of that day to prep yourself for that game?
Well, first of all, just going back to that one game, that was probably to this day the most intense game I've been a part of from start to finish. Until Danny Ferry missed that like 75-foot heave that went off the back of the rim. Yeah, we didn't secure it, but that was very intense, and it was a bloodbath. But I've always said, and everyone asks me all the time, and they always ask me, and they're kind of surprised. They think it's tough for anybody to go into play in Cameron or something like that. And I'm always of the notion, and I think everyone on our team was always like, we wanted to go into Cameron. I love being in there and not being able to hear anything but a buzz in my ear, and just being part of that game when you're out there and so involved in it that you don't even notice the noise. Those are some of the funnest games I played in. Of course, not only at Duke, but wherever you're on the road. If you're a competitor and an athlete, that's something that does nothing but help you play, in my mind anyways. I think that as a younger player, being part of that rivalry is a little intimidating when you're not getting the bigger minutes, when you're coming in and getting 5 minutes here and 6 minutes here. Like, I was obviously one of those players who developed over my career and didn't get to play the bigger minutes to maybe my last 2 years. So when I come in at Duke and would play 6 or 7 minutes, it is a little intimidating just because you are on a spot and it's a big game and you have to kind of perform, and you're not going to get a lot of minutes to do that. But I tell you what, getting ready for the Duke game at home, but even more so on the road, was always something that didn't take really anything to get ready for it as far as motivation. Some of the most favorite memories are going into Cameron as an underdog and winning by 20 points. I think we did that one of those late 80 years, 88 or 89 with King Rice hitting some clutch free throws down the stretch. It's just something that it calls a rivalry game. Go ahead.
What was that, R.L.?
I said that hasn't happened lately. 20-point games. Either way.
Well, and that's the thing. We talk about the rivalry, and I don't know if we're going to get to this later, but it is undoubtedly, in my mind, one of the best rivalries, mainly because of what we're talking about. Like, I think these games are always pretty much neck and neck. And we can talk about that in a second. But I love getting over there to Cameron or anywhere where there's any hint of an emotional game as a competitor. You really get up for those.
Answer this question for me, because it feels like it's two different types of rivalries at this point. Now this was a different time. Back when you were at Carolina, who did you guys consider your most hated rival? Was it Duke or was it NC State?
Well, I can only speak for myself. I've never felt remotely the same about NC State than I have about Duke. as a player.
There you go.
Even now, as a 25, 30-year-old vet out of the ACC, I have no problem with anybody from NC State. But like to this day, Duke is just something like I have to cringe when I say to tell somebody that I played with Bobby Hurley in Sacramento, and he was like a nice guy. Like I don't really volunteer that because literally there's no one from Duke that I will ever admit that I like. And I know that there are good people over there. I know Coach K is a great coach and well respected. He's been through my house in Alabama recruiting me. I saw him in the early 80s before he got going. But it is when you talk about programs and compare programs, I draw the line and say they're different programs. And in my mind, I was part of the best one.
Pete Chilcutt joining us here on the Bleav in Heels Hoops podcast, presented by Bleav Podcast Networks. You actually played with Hubert Davis. Your careers overlapped. We'll get to that in just a second in terms of Hubert the man, Hubert the player. Any funny stories you got with Hubert? R.L, anything you got for Pete while we got him?
One of the things I wanted to ask, at the end there, when R.J. Davis was guarding Nathan George. But because of the switching, and with Roy Williams, you always fought through the screen, and under Roy, RJ would have fought through the screen, but instead there was the switch, and Armando was on him, and he's a little quicker, so he kind of went by Armando. He had to make a tough shot, a really tough shot, high arcer to bank it in. But just in general, what's your feeling on the switching this year, and how do you think it's going?
It's funny you actually bring that play up because I made a comment, I think off the air to Jones that they had run that top pick and roll 900 times last night. We knew it was coming. And if you know it's coming, you knew they're going to run that play in a key stretch there because they wanted to switch. And I would have done the same thing. I think that should have been, and I'm not in any means double questioning the coach. I'm not a coach. I've never coached. But I would like to have seen them on that one play say, hey, stay with them. Hey, stay with them. Don't switch on this one. Go under, go over. They're not going to shoot a jump shot right there. So maybe go under that screen. Just stay between him and the basket. But as to your point, Armando did a great job. Pretty good keeping him, really close to the rim. It was a very tough shot. I thought he may have a chance to block it, or he did bother it. It was a great shot. But I did think about that after the fact that would have been a good time maybe to kind of stop the switching just for that one play. I think we all knew that was coming. They've been running that a lot, but it didn't work out that way. Tough shot. They won. We didn't get the call, and we move on.
And then also some of the switching is just 1 through 4. So there have been times when that switch would not have been made.
True.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah. So when they got that switch and got it on Armando, I was like, okay, this is what they wanted. But to Armando's defense, for the most part, that's worked out okay whenever they've switched like that this season so far. That's really the few time it's happened where it kind of backfired on us. And again, it took a travel and a wild left-handed layup and just all kinds of stuff happened at the end of this game for it to happen. So for me, it makes me feel better going into Saturday that, okay, we needed this, and this to happen for us to lose by 1 on the road to Georgia Tech, who's already beaten Duke and these other teams. So they've already proven they can do it. I didn't go out of that game feeling like Carolina still wasn't the best in ACC to date, or that being at home, we're undefeated at home. I feel honestly, this is one of the few years where with Duke Carolina coming up, and it's strange because they're both going to be ranked in the top 10 for the first time. What is it, R.L.? Like in 5 or 6 years, something like that.
Like, well, I don't know exactly.
Yeah, I can't remember the year. But it's going to be the first time they're both in the top 10 against each other. And for me, it's going to be one of the first times where I'm not really worried going into the game. Like, I know what we can do. And I've seen us play against enough top competition where I'm like, if we just do what we do, we're at that point where if we do what we do, it don't really matter who we're playing. Like, we're gonna score 85 points. We're gonna play defense. We're gonna rebound. We're gonna hit threes. You can't defend all of it. So it's one of those things where can Duke match us as opposed to us having to come in matching Duke, which I feel like we've been having to do the past 4 or 5 years. We had to go in and match Duke's intensity with limited soldiers. Now I feel like we're coming in with a full army. We know what we're going to do. Can you stop us? And that's a little different from what Duke is used to. Pete, who's your most hated Duke Blue Devil? Who do you hate the most?
Now,
You're amongst friends here, so you can, whoever.
no one's in this, right? Okay, so I have a lot of history.
It's going to be clipped later for social media, so.
I took one of my official visits to Duke. I went on around the campus with Quinn Snyder and Danny Ferry. And again, Coach K came to my house, really nice guy. Can I tell you first my maybe two, three that I do like?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fair.
I'll start with Quinn Snyder was really nice. Allah Abdinabi was a pretty nice guy. Met him a bunch of times. Played with Bobby Hurley. I hate to admit it. Played with Bobby Hurley in SAC right before his accident. Actually, during that whole time frame, he was really a great guy. And I've seen him.
No, don't tell us that.
let me quantify. He was a great teammate.
Okay, there you go.
Now, guys who I have grown to just dislike over time, and even though we took him on a visit around here, I think everyone would agree that no one really likes Christian Laettner. I think Hubert broke the mold. Hubert played with him in Dallas, and I heard him call him, "Hey, Chris, what's up?" Come on.
Oh no.
No, he's talked about being good friends with him.
Yeah. So that was.
Oh no, Hubert, what are you doing?
Deep down, these guys are probably decent people, but they do have that flaw. But probably I would probably say that over time, it's gone between Danny Ferry and Christian Laettner.
I feel that for sure. And to me, it's funny because I'm a lifelong Carolina fan. I grew up in a Carolina household. My dad painted my house Carolina blue when I was 10 years old, and it's still blue to this day. It doesn't feel the same as those rivalries back then, especially the late 80s, early 90s Heels Blue Devil matchups when you've got you and Hubert and Rick Fox and J.R. Reed and King Rice running around against Danny Ferry and Christian Laettner and Bobby Hurley and all those guys. You grew to hate the players because they were there so long. They were 3-4 year guys, so you grew a hatred for them. You learned about them freshman year, you began to hate them sophomore year, and if it was Laettner, you were full blown just by the time you got this junior year. So it was it's different now, where the last Duke guy I can remember player that I had that kind of hatred for was JJ Redick. I think he might be the last one, because he's the last one I could think of that was there 4 years. No, not JJ Redick. Grayson
Allen.
Yeah, it took me a minute, but it came. The last thing Grayson Allen. He's the last, and he was a 4-year guy too. And he kind of.
What I remember interviewing Grayson Allen at the ACC tournament in the dressing room and coming away thinking he's a nice guy and thinking, wow, he's nothing like he is on the court. So like Pete says, some of these people he might hate on the court are not bad guys off the court.
See.
That's a solid point, though. I think everything is changing with how it is today, as far as the as a fan base, you really need someone to hate, and we find ourselves hating the school now as opposed to individual players, and because they're really not there. The good ones that you really want to hate, they leave, and so I don't think it's the same. I don't think it's probably nearly as intense. The physical battles between these players are going to be different every year because it's different players. You're going to have teams that are kind of wildly fluctuating on their talent level. It seems like we've been lately, probably for a decade or more, having the quality of the top, 5-star athletes coming through here that they've had, and I think we've done extremely well against that.
Yeah.
But it's just what it is. But I think it's definitely a different mindset now as far as how you want to focus your hate.
I think for me, it's shifted more from the Duke players and Coach K, because for a while when he was doing the one and dones, it shifted to him. It was you're the reason why we don't you're the creation of all this. But now with him gone, and everything with the portal and everything else going on, it's kind of hard to hate the player. It's kind of hard to keep track of the roster over at Duke sometimes because we got so many parts coming in and out. Mine has shifted to the fan base, the Duke fan base. That's where it is now, where it's the UNC fan base versus the Carolina fan base. Because you hear these stories of the players, they see each other. They're 8 miles apart from each other. They see each other out to eat, barbershops. They know each other. They've played the same circuits together for, the past 5, 6, 7 years. So it's not really weird for the players. And that's kind of my question. The intensity level. Now I know once the game starts, it'll pick itself up. But I gotta think that back then the intensity level was different because you knew who you were playing against. It was the same dudes you played against the year before or 2 years ago. And like this is just another chapter in the battle. Whereas I saw that people were saying, well, Carolina's a veteran team this year. They shouldn't have fell into this trap game or whatnot. I don't think they thought it was a trap game. And people kind of forget there's only 4 guys on this team that have played Duke in a Carolina jersey. It's one thing to play them as a Boston College player and go play at Duke. It's a whole other world to play them in a Carolina uniform and go over there and play, or them come over here. So the Cormac Ryans and the Harrison Ingrams, I think Cormac Ryan's like 24, 25. He's played against Duke before. He's 25. He's played against Duke before. He's a grown man. He's never played him in a Carolina situation. Like he's never been in that atmosphere. Do you believe in trap games? Do you think that they were looking at Duke beforehand before they went to this Georgia Tech game? Or do you think Georgia Tech just played a better game?
I think trap games are real. I don't think we fell into that trap. I think we're too veteran, like you mentioned. We have too many vets on this team that have been around too many games. I think if you have a younger team, we had mainly freshmen and sophomores that were getting these minutes. That might be a problem. I didn't feel last night in the arena that we were taking anything for granted, or that we thought we were going to coast through this game. I just thought we laid an egg. Nothing to do with that. But yeah, I believe that's a real thing, though.
I think Atlanta was the thing.
Yeah, and that again, it just something about Atlanta. We have issues in Atlanta. And I saw the series record. Carolina leads the series like 70-30 or something like that, like they do for most of these teams that they've played against.
All you need to know this season, Carolina is 17-2 outside of Atlanta, 0-2 in Atlanta. And Brian Ives at ESPN came up with in the last 30 men's basketball and football games, Carolina and Atlanta is 10-20.
Wow, that's insane.
And there's history. I mean, you go back to losing the 1977 Final Four and losing in the championship game to Marquette, and then 1984, a Michael Jordan-led team lost in the Sweet 16 to Indiana and Miami. So there's a lot of Carolina hurt that's happened in Atlanta.
There was a lot of Carolina guys there in the fans last night.
It looked like half the stands were Carolina and blue.
Yeah, they were a big part of the crowd last night.
Got some since we are live, and I forgot to mention it. When we are on, we are live, and we do take questions from the gallery watching on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter, wherever you might be catching this. 828 Lawson says got to be more crisp Saturday. Bradley Lovelace says, should we be concerned about our offensive efficiency at this point? We're 90 plus according to Ken Palm. Thoughts on that, guys? I'm not really worried about the offense.
I talked to Coach Lebo in the lobby before the game, so this was before the game, and we were talking about defense and defense this and how solid we've been defensively, and he made the comment, which kind of came true during the game, that we have not really hit our stride offensively, and that was gonna come at some point, and that was when this team would really take off.
Right. I mean, it's defense. I mean, there are a couple of games this season. Pittsburgh was one of them where they would have been in a massive hole early in the game if the defense wasn't playing well. So, holding most of the teams under 70 points in the ACC games, that they should be able to win consistently if they're able to do that. Cadeau starts making the jumpers, and Cormac Ryan can be more consistent. That offense could really take off, and if the defense stays as good as it has been, and the rebounding stays as consistently as it has been, and that was good last night too. Yeah. They should go deep into March.
We haven't even talked about how how anyone can foul out in 8 minutes. I mean,
what was that about? Like, what happened?
I think number 4 was him being a little bit over aggressive. That was a bad foul. But the other 4 could have gone given no call at all.
That's why I was mad at the last no call, because I'm like, Elliot Cadeau just had like 3 ghost foul calls in like 2 minutes or whatever, and then you didn't call this. Like,
how about comparing the amount of contact Ebenezer Duwana made on RJ Davis to the total amount of contact in Elliott's 5 fouls?
Yeah. And honestly, if Cadeau was out there for that last little stretch, we probably win that game, to be honest. So see, I'm not really too worried about it. But of course, it's Duke Carolina. It always delivers, like Jay Billis would say. And I don't expect to, I've been joking around. Carolina's going to win by 11 because we lost and blah, blah, blah. I don't expect that. Like, it's Carolina Duke. It's going to be a 2, 3 point, 4 point game. It's been that way even when one side's been down and the other one's up. I like to say that Carolina and Duke are spotters for each other at the gym, pretty much. Like, they both could be fine on their own, but they are better when the other one is good too, because the other one has to kind of keep up with them. And that's the dynamic we don't have with NC State or with Wake Forest or any of these other schools. So Wayne Carter checking in. What's up, Wayne? He says, who's going to guard who on Saturday? Well, we just talked about it. Carolina switches on everything now, which they used to not do. So that may not matter. What is there a matchup that you're looking at going into Saturday that's going to be a key matchup?
I wonder who's going to be guarding Filipowski. He's going to be a matchup problem. I'm wondering if Ingram might be getting some of the time there instead of Mondo. And Proctor, I wonder who's going to be guarding him. Maybe.
That's a good question. I don't know. That's a great question. Because would you pick a dough on him? I don't.
I think you hit on it with all the switching. It seems like everyone's going to be all over the place. I have a lot of. I think Baycott could guard Filipowski. I really do. I think especially the way he's been playing defense. He's really catching, shooting those open shots. But he's doing a lot of driving. I think Baycott can handle his drives. You got to make sure just obviously stay out of foul trouble on those. But I think the bigger thing is going to be. Can we get to our rotations when we're switching? Can we, they got some bigger guards. Can we help out on those? I think if we've been kind of how we are, and as you mentioned, Harrison Ingram can guard anybody on the court. You got guys coming off the bench that can do that with Seth and Jalen. I just love this team's diversity with on defense, especially.
Wayne comes back with Ingram on Mitchell. That sounds about right. He'll probably start off on it, or Cormac might be on Mitchell for a little bit. I'm not mad at I assume Cormac Ryan is still in the starting lineup instead of Jalen Winters at this point because of his defense and the other things he's doing. Because Cormac has been extremely streaky like all year. He might have a stretch where he hits 2-3 threes in a row in like a 2-minute period, and then he might go 0 for 5 like after that. But Hubert's a shooter, so he's kind of living or dying with it, and it hadn't really killed them to this point. And Cormac does other things where I kind of expected Winters by this point to maybe have surpassed him, and he hadn't. And actually, it didn't feel like he played a whole lot last night. Did he? He played a couple minutes. Winters, right? Last night, I thought that was kind of.
Well, yeah, I like what he brings, but I think he's a very effective off the bench, bringing that energy and so diverse off the bench. What he can do defensively with the rebounding, defense, things like that. So we'll see.
So, former Carolina big man Pete Chilcutt joining us here on the Bleav in Heels Hoops podcast presented by Bleav Podcast Networks. I do this every week, RL. I keep forgetting to read the read. I'm supposed to read the read in the first 2 minutes, and we're 34 minutes into the into the show. Bleav I got you covered, though. With the NFL playoffs here and the NBA season in full swing, BetOnline has you covered with all the up-to-the-second odds, news, and scores. With additional odds, lines, and trends and info on both desktop and mobile, you can access the world's best wagering information anytime. Head there today to get into the action and see all the updated odds. Remember to use the promo code Bleav, BLEAV, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet online where the game starts. And we'll get into real quick. I wanted to take advantage while we had Pete here. Pete, you were a former teammate of current head coach Hubert Davis. Any stories you can tell us without getting in trouble about college days with Hubert? Because we hear more and more about him. Now each day we're like, I didn't realize, okay, he doesn't cuss. I knew he was really religious. The whole thing with Harrison last week where he was saying he substitutes the word fart for cuss words and so things like that. Was he like that when you guys were in school? Or?
Well, it's funny. Now, I'm assuming people have heard this story, but I'll go through it a little bit quickly. But regarding the fart word, he doesn't cuss, and that's going back to high school. College. Coach Smith was a stickler for swearing. If you cuss in a practice, blow the whistle, the entire team on the line for a 6-crossing sprint in 30 seconds.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Yeah.
So you could safe to say no one cussed in practice. And I always, to step away for a second, Coach K's practices were probably not the same.
Probably not.
Probably not. I think two fans would agree with that.
We're in practice one day, and Hubert makes a play, maybe throws that out of bounds, maybe gets scored on, and he goes in this, typical Hubert with this little poofy hairdo. He goes, fart, as intensely as he could. And Coach Smith blew the whistle. He goes, all right, everyone on the line. He goes, for you, that's a cuss word. And what but if you think about it, the rule was not necessarily that he didn't like swearing. He thought swearing was getting you out of your game. You're losing your mental edge. And that's what it was all about with him. And if you really think about that, that's pretty an amazing story that he made him run, but not because it was a cuss word necessarily, but because you're losing your cool. You can't lose your cool on the court. You got to stay focused and be locked in. And I thought it was funny at the time, and it's still a funny story to tell, but it's a great insight into Coach Smith's mind and how he thought about things. The only other thing I'd say about living with Hubert was he was very religious man. We used to go out quite a bit back in those days. We had some partiers on the team, with Steve Bucknall and J.R. Reed and Marty Hensley. Those guys have been in a few bars. I was usually at the library, so I never went. But Hubert was always, Hubert, what are you doing tonight? And he's like, oh, I'm taking so-and-so to an ice cream social. And he was serious. He'd go out and do these ice cream socials, and we used to give him a hard time about that. He was a man who stuck to his values even back then, and you can respect that for a college-age kid. That is very, very impressive. He was a fun guy, a great guy to live with. I lived with him and Justin Carrault, who was our head manager. And then I was happy enough to get out of that apartment out there in Highland Hills in Carborough because Kevin Salvadori moved in after I left, and I was like, that means I'm clear of the damages. And I lived there for 3 years. I lived there for 3 years out there. Anyway.
Yeah, on Coach Davis's radio show on Monday, he talked about how he can't really give players a hard time for talking to the opponent during the game because he said he was a talker a lot. Do you remember him talking a lot to the opponent game?
Well,
that's good.
No, I don't remember him talking to opponents. I know he used to get mad at me a couple of times. I'd be guarding, I'd switch off on him in practice, and he'd do like one of those quick little guard moves. He'd go right, spin left, and I'd be standing right there, and I'd take a charge, and he's like, "You're so slow. You never moved in the first place." Like, yep, our ball. Yeah.
Mission accomplished.
He wasn't wrong. But, yeah, he was. The thing about Hubert, which if you guys have not been to a practice, the thing about Hubert that I love is he gets a rap almost for being too nice. And that guy, you don't play 12 years in the league. You don't go from nothing, from no chance to making it in the league and playing at Carolina without being a fiery competitor. And if you go to one of his practices, you're going to see a different side of him that you probably didn't know existed. He's doing everything besides the cussing that goes along with it. He's getting into the guys. He's yelling. He's not happy. He's a fiery coach, and you don't see that a lot in the games. And his personality is so good that you think he's this nice guy, just too nice on the guys. But he's a tough coach, and I think the players buy into that because they see his passion, and they're really responding this year to how he's coaching. He's been talking about defense and rebounding every year. Yeah. People are acting like, oh, now he's doing a better job. Well, he's been doing the same thing. I think the guys are really just buying into it this year, especially with the new guys. It's been great to see, but it's kind of funny how people think coaches all of a sudden are changing something. I think he's been preaching that same message.
Well, he's got, it's his players finally. The first 2 years he was coaching, he was basically kind of coaching the remnants of Roy's last couple of recruiting classes. And let's be honest, guys, the last one or two, they weren't that good. So it wasn't like the cupboard was full when Roy left, and then add in one and dones like Cole Anthony, and you don't have a whole lot there. So I saw a lot of people complaining about Dontrez Styles. Why didn't they try to keep him and some of the other guys that were here before? They just didn't fit what Hubert wanted to do. I think it's pretty clear at this point because he's playing all the way down to Zayden High. He's going about 10, 11 deep in this roster sometimes on some nights. And I've said, and now maybe you can clear this up so I won't say it anymore, Pete, because you actually played for the man. I've said that Hubert went out and built a Dean Smith roster out of the portal. Like, he literally went 1 through 12. And like, if you look at a Dean Smith roster, he would have specific players that did specific things at specific spots every year. the fast point guard, the power forward that's like the J.R. Reed, James Worthy type, who, in my opinion, is Harrison Ingram on this team. Your big man that can get a bucket in the paint. Like, they got the first guy off the bench, that first point guard off the bench. He went out and got all that and added to what he had. Does this team remind you of Dean Smith teams you played on in the past, or am I just crazy?
That's a great point. It's different, and only in the sense that Coach Smith had that premonition idea of seeing what was going to develop down the road. He had to kind of cultivate me, for example, who sucked as a freshman, to get to where I was. But he saw that in me, and he saw that in his recruits. Hubert has the benefit of kind of seeing guys who have done some things already, so he kind of knows more what he's going to get, and he gets to kind of, I wouldn't say hand pick them, but it probably is closer to that than it is recruiting them. I think some of these guys were happy to come to Carolina. I think this team is extremely similar to some of the teams I was on, mainly because the deepness in 8 or 9 guys, and I've said this, I think 6 or 7 guys could lead us in scoring on any given night. Now, it hasn't really happened that way, but we got guys on here who are really good, and we're really deep, and that is a trademark of Coach Smith's teams, where guys that are 7th guys on a team, you don't really see a drop off when they come in, and that's impressive. I think that when we get to that style, you see more coaching flexibility. He can do a lot more things. Some of the substitutions that he couldn't make a couple years ago, he can do now, and he can do so without worrying about the ramifications. And I think that's nothing. I'm thinking this is not a 1-year thing. This is how he wants to be. And like you said, the first 2 years was just hard to get there, and now he's able to.
It seems like he trusts the bench a lot more this season than he did last season.
Yeah, because I was going to say last year, that whole situation you guys were talking about at the beginning of the show with Baycott, him pulling him out and having Washington come in for 5 or 6 minutes. He couldn't do that last year. You couldn't take Baycott out just because you were mad at him. Like, he had to stay in there, and you had to stew from the sideline and hope he got it together during the game, which a lot of times he did. But now he has the ability to be able to pull him out, make Armando think about it, and then put him back in the game. Which is different. And I will say this too, for those who are going to come at me, so this isn't a Dean Smith roster, blah, blah, blah. There are variations to what Dean had going on, just like Roy took what Dean had and altered it to what he wanted. Roy's offense had 2 running big men on it at the same time, at all times. Whoever came off the bench was the 3rd big man that was going to, the Tony Woods, whoever, that was going to run with the Tyler Zellers of the world and the Bryce Johnsons of the world. With Hubert, his offense is different than Dean's because he's running 2 point guards. That he said himself he fell in love with during the 2015-16 season when Marcus Page and Joel Berry were running point for Roy, and he was on the staff, and he fell in love with the idea and wanted to implement it, and that's what he has now with R.J. Davis running the point sometimes. You got Cadeau starting running the point, and Seth Trimble coming off the bench running the point. So you got those 3. So it's the same variation, same tree, but everything else, I love that he's peppered in, and I love the fact he went out and found somebody like Harrison Ingram. Like, I think, to me, that's what Carolina basketball has been missing for a while. That kind of the utility guy, the guy that can kind of do a little bit of everything. Like, he can shoot threes, he can rebound, he can post up, which I love because I'm old school. I like back to the basket basketball, and he will take a guy down there, and he'll get you a bucket if you need a bucket. He does the little things, and we haven't had a guy like that. It's maybe Theo Pinson, his first name that came to my mind that did a little bit of everything. But he does it better. So, like, I'm really impressed with Harrison. Not worried about the loss last night. If anything, I think it'll keep them more focused for Saturday. Before we get out of here, though, let's talk about Saturday. Duke, Carolina. There's a lot more at stake here than before the day started yesterday, because now if Duke wins this game, they'll be a tie for first atop the ACC regular season going into the second half of it. Carolina's undefeated at home this season. Thoughts on this game? Anything in particular that worries you about this game? How do you think this game is going to play out? Are you willing to make a prediction on a Wednesday of rivalry week, or how are you feeling going into this game, guys?
I think how R.L. mentioned earlier, if we just play how we've been playing, I think we'll be fine. I think we deviate a bunch from that, we could have some issues. But we've been played solid. We kind of have established that we're a pretty good defensive team and rebounding team over the last 10 games or so. If we can continue that, I think the shooting, the scoring will take care of itself. The only problem is going to happen if we somehow forget how to defend and make some bonehead plays or get somebody in foul trouble, and somebody can foul out in 8 minutes or something. That might be a problem. It's going to be tight, like you mentioned. It's going to be a good game. I'm looking forward to that. I'm confident that if we play like we have been, we'll be fine.
R.L.
Yeah, I mean, if they can limit Therese Proctor and Filipowski, they'll go a long way. But I'm telling you, watching Duke recently, their defense they're really turning up their defense. So it's not going to be easy to be productive offensively against those guys. It'll be important to space them out and make a few perimeter shots and open things up inside for Mondo.
It's weird that Duke seems like under the radar, don't they? Don't they seem like no one's really talking about them like they normally do? I mean, they're ranked 7th in the country, and they've only lost 2 games fully healthy, from my understanding, and that was earlier in the year against Arizona and Georgia Tech. I think it was I think they had somebody out. I think Mitchell was out and somebody else was out during the Georgia Tech game. There was somebody else, or Arkansas. They lost to Arkansas on the road at Arkansas when they set like an attendance record or whatever for that game. And that was earlier in the year too. So it just feels like nobody's talking about Duke. Everybody's talking about the rotation of teams in the top 5 or 6 that just keep rotating in and out like every week. It feels like 2-3 teams in the top 5 lose every week, and we're one of them now from this week. Although I don't know if that loss is really going to affect their standing in the AP, to be honest. It depends on what happens Saturday. They end up beating Duke by 5 on Saturday, they'll just stay at 3, or they might move up depending on what happens to Purdue or who's number 1 right now. I can't even keep track.
UConn.
Yeah, and we've lost to UConn. And actually, that UConn game was the only game this year I really felt like, yeah, they really just beat us. Like there wasn't really anything we could do. Like in the Georgia Tech game, there was things we could do and still win the game. They played well enough to win. That UConn game, I was like, we ain't ready for them yet. Like they're playing different than we are. Now, come March, if we see them again, that might be a different story. But anybody want to give a prediction for Saturday? There you go. Pete Chilcutt joined us here. Former UNC big man, played for Dean Smith, teammate of Hubert Davis. Hopefully we'll be able to add you to the host rotation, have you come on throughout the season. You can hear him on the Tar Heel radio network with Jones Angel. You're in a rotation there. It's you, Joel Berry.
Joel Berry's only doing a few. He has a lot of TV stuff going on. Marcus Ginyard and Tyler Zeller.
And we've been talking to all of them. Yeah.
And
so
Tyler Hansborough's done a couple.
Yeah, Hansborough's done a few. So yeah, it's great that they're rotating the guys out and giving Jones somebody to play with and call these games. And a lot of times I'll choose to go listen to the game on the radio. I'll get in the car and drive around if it's a day game so I can hear it, the radio call, as opposed to whoever's calling it on TV. So definitely check that out. The game is 6:30 p.m. Saturday on ESPN. Trust me, ESPN will tell you about it from now until then, so you won't forget. So it is the biggest game in college basketball. It usually delivers every year. And we'll leave it on Timothy Phelps saying UNC has to play like nothing to lose, everything to win. I think they will, because didn't we get swept by Duke last year, if I'm not mistaken?
Yes, we did.
So you got guys on this team that remember getting swept by Duke. There's at least 4 of them that got swept by Duke last year, and it's not a good feeling as a fan. Did you ever get swept by Duke in a year, Pete?
I want to say my sophomore year, we got swept by, I think it was us in the tournament. It was a three. It
was like 88, 88,
yeah.
Because in 89, we won that ACC championship game. Yeah, like those years are never fun, especially when you got to deal with the whole off season and everybody's chirping and yada, yada, yada. But I do love the fact that Carolina Duke, it feels like it's kind of back. As much as I dislike the Duke program in general, I'm very happy that they've got someone like John Shire running it, because I feel like it's the same situation as us with Hubert. You got a former player. He understands the fabric of the team, what it's about. He understands this rivalry. And I'm a big stickler of keeping things like that intact as you go through coach to coach and player to player. It's really hard to do. And you've seen it fall apart a lot of blue bloods, really. But Carolina Duke's still going strong here in 2024. So any last words for the crew that's watching tonight, guys?
Nope. Just looking forward. The rivalry is so great, and the best one in all the sports for me, because it never really has took a downturn. You know, you mentioned some teams have been down. We're down. They're down. They're up. We're down. the games are always competitive. I think when they throw that stat up on ESPN about the total points, that's always amazing to see that it's so close after all these years. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be competitive. I wish I was out there. I'll be down there close as I can get to the floor, but I'm looking forward to that battle.
I'm telling you, anybody who thinks it's a wine and cheese crowd should go to the Smith Center for the Duke game. Oh. That's the one game where every seat is filled. Most of the crowd is standing for the majority of the game, and it's just a crazy, loud environment. And just you can't get much better in college basketball.
I do think it's the best sports rivalry for what Pete just said, because whenever I say it and people are like, well, no, what about this or what about that? Like Yankees Red Sox, or the one I have up there, Lakers Celtics. I'm a huge Lakers fan. Alabama Auburn, like that kind of Ohio State Michigan. Those are all considered rivalries, but usually they're one-sided. Like one side has won the majority of those games in those rivalries. And when the other side wins one, it's like a breakthrough. Like, oh, this wasn't supposed to happen, and it's like a holiday for for that side or whatever. Even Lakers Celtics, like the if you look at the records between them, the Celtics own them, like the 60s and the 70s, and even until the 80s. But they're still behind record-wise against the Lakers. But this rivalry here, it's like even, like pretty much all the way down. Like you said, Pete, the points. I think like the number of fouls called, like all the random numbers, it's all so like even between them. They both send kids to the league. They both have All-Americans. They both win rings. They both are threats to go deep every year. It just, nothing's better than it. I'm just happy to be a part of the rivalry, and just be like, I understand it. I grew up in it. Like you don't have to live in North Carolina to understand it, but it helps if you're here. I seriously thought, Pete, that the Final Four game was going to be the end of it. Like we were going to, after it was over, the streets were going to riot, Walmarts were going to get destroyed, like because we just would not handle it. Like and somehow it all worked out. And I do have to admit, after that game, I didn't feel the same way about the rivalry for about a year. So like last year in particular, it just it didn't feel exactly the same. But by the time the year was over, it already started sinking back in. Like I can't stand Duke. Like the Final Four doesn't even matter anymore. It was 2 years ago. So we'll start it back up again Saturday 6:30. ESPN. Everybody out there, go do us a favor, rate and subscribe. Bleav in Hills Hoops. You can do it either through the Bleav Podcast Network, where you can get the audio versions of this each week. We usually come about once a week. We recap what's happened earlier in the week, and we preview what's about to happen for Tar Heel Hoops. Or you can go to the Tobacco Road Sports Radio YouTube channel, youtube.com/@Tobacco Road Sports Radio, or over at Tar Heel Tribune. You can subscribe there and catch the video format of this every week when it drops as well. And if we're live, again, you can come on, you can comment, you can ask us questions like Wayne here. You can interact with us, which is something a little different than what other pods are doing right now. So definitely appreciate everybody that stopped by tonight to talk to us here. Pete, appreciate you coming through, and we'll definitely have you back on the next couple of weeks.
I appreciate the offer, and as long as I can fit it in my schedule, I'll be happy to be here.
R.L., anything you got before we go out here, R.L.?
No.
All right. Well, we'll hit it right there. You've been watching and listening to the Bleav in Hills Hoop podcast here on Bleav Podcast Networks, presented by Bet Online. Go Heels.